Hey, welcome back for more Reddit stories. Today we have a couple of nice malicious compliance stories for you to enjoy, so sit back and let's go. Oh sir, this transaction can take as long as you need. I'm paid by the hour. I used to be a shift manager at a collectible store where we sold a lot of used movies, games, figurines, etc. The kind of place that old school collectors drool over. So we saw our fair share of enthusiasts coming and going. A lot of them were really nice, passionate people that were just jazzled as hell that they had a local place to look for rarities. Often chatty, often not super aware of how much time they were taking from staff by striking up a conversation, but it was both good for business and pretty fun to oblige these people when they came in, so we often did. We had a guy who for a period of a few months would come in about once a week to look at the cartridge games. The thing to know about our cartridge games is that they were all on display in large glass cases, which if you wanted to sift through them, required an employee to wait with you to prevent theft. Some stuff in those cases was worth hundreds of dollars. Not typically a big problem, but this guy often bought items in bulk and had very particular tastes. I'm not sure if he was a reseller, which we sometimes saw, or an honest-to-goodness collector, but he would only ever buy bags of our cheapest stock. Every week he would come in and request someone open each case one by one, and he could spend 45 minutes to an hour just browsing through titles. This wouldn't have been the biggest deal, but we typically only had 3 or 4 people working, and this store could get pretty busy on evenings and weekends. Going from 2 cashiers to 1 cashier made a big difference. We would end up getting swallowed by the late day rush without one of our staff members so consistently that we started making a policy just for this guy where he could leave his ID at the counter with us as collateral and browse through the games unattended. However, this didn't stop other people from nabbing stuff while he wasn't looking, so it wasn't a sustainable option. Along with spending forever browsing, this guy also took an eternity to check out. He would group the games up by price, type his estimated cost into a calculator, add text, then when you rang it up, he would argue with you about how, oh no, this isn't what I got, look at this, and then show you the calculator and explain the math as if any of this was manually calculated by us, which was basically always wrong. To his credit, sometimes discounts had to be manually added to certain items that I know at least one newbie forgot to do. But in general, most of the time the computer would generate the correct price and he would argue it. I didn't like him coming in and causing backups, especially because he was rude to my staff when he did it, so I decided to take the matters into my own hands. On a day when I was shift leader, I saw him enter the store. I pulled aside one of my cashiers and told him just to help the guy as usual, then let me ring him up. My employee got the idea and did as I asked, walking our regular to the cabinets and babysitting him for nearly an hour. Luckily it was early afternoon and we weren't terribly busy. When the customer finally got to the counter, he had a basket full of items, stacked them up, and I hopped in front of the computer. He started punching all of his values into the calculator and got right to work telling me about how much each thing should be and what the total should come out to. I put on my best customer service smile and said, "Of course, sir, I want to make sure that you're getting everything exactly as calculated, so we can go down the items together and make sure everything rings up correctly." Our computers ran on a system that would automatically scan the price and generate the number. But for things like specialty sales and discounts for items that didn't have their own product entry, it was possible for a manager to key in a manual price for any item scanned, even if it was the same price. So that's exactly what I did. For each item, reading the price out slowly to him to make sure he heard it. And he had 118 items. I went down each old cartridge, clearly stating and typing them $1.99, $2.99, $1.99, and he followed along with me. By the time I got to the end of the list, it must have been 15 or 20 minutes of just scanning items, and I gave him his total. Of course, he counted it. He told me that that's not what he got on his calculator, and showed me the math and explained how everything should have been applied. "Oh, my mistake, sir. Let's go through it again to make sure we have everything right." I cleared the transaction and started over. One more time, all 118 items, reading each price as slowly and clearly as I could, plunking the number keys loudly as I typed them in. Again, another 15 to 20 minutes of just scanning and typing. The customer was looking slightly agitated, but followed along on his calculator, and when I got to the end of the list, the total was exactly the same as before. He shook his head, saying, "No, that's not right. There's something wrong with the computer." I watched him go through the math again, retyping everything in. Then after a moment, he paused, surprised. "Oh, I added one of these in wrong. Okay, you had the right price." I did my best to keep my face as calm and apologetic as possible. "I'm sorry, sir, but after you said the math was wrong, I cleared the transaction again." "No worries, we can scan the items back in." So there we went. Round 3, 118 items, me typing in each price manually and reading it out loud nice and slow so he could be sure I was doing it right. At this point, he had definitely caught on to what I was doing. He quietly said, "Could we hurry it up a little?" And so I started reading and plunking a bit faster. Still took a nice 50 minutes to get through the list again. And lo and behold, same price as before. He paid the total without another word and left with his items. I never saw him back in the store again, at least not while I was working. Won't get me a much needed PC upgrade to properly do my job? Okay, I'll make you watch me work. I run the parts room at an independently owned auto body and collision repair shop. We will call the owners Mr. and Mrs. Bossman. We do mostly insurance repairs and always have between 20 and 50 vehicles on property in various states of repair, depending on how busy we are. Once the estimate for a specific vehicle is approved, my job is primarily to order all the parts for the repair, track and receive and organize all the parts for all ongoing repairs as they arrive. Input the invoicing and process any returns for wrong, damaged, unnecessary parts and such. Plus IT work. Because apparently I'm the only person there who knows you can just Google a problem and somebody has usually already posted the answer on a message board from 6 years ago. I complain a lot, but in actuality, I very much like my job and I've become exceedingly good at it over the years. My coworkers are generally pretty great, there's almost no office drama, I don't usually deal with the general public, and the owners are mostly solid bosses, a husband and wife team. Mr. Bossman runs the day-to-day shop and he is there on site pretty much every day, while Mrs. Bossman comes in periodically to do the books, which she watches like a hawk. Mr. Bossman is a decent guy so far as bosses go, but Mrs. Bossman is great. She's just one of those high personality types who's all peaches and sunshine and rainbows 90% of the time, right up until the moment something doesn't go entirely her way, at which she drops the smile and becomes the stubbornest, immovable object you've ever butted heads against. May God help you if you actually anger her. She's not a Karen in the slightest, she's just an elemental force of nature and you can bend like the reed or break like the twig. So I deal with Mr. Bossman on a daily basis and only deal with Mrs. Bossman a few times a week when she needs something for accounting. My default work ethics used to be set to a sack of potatoes, but that doesn't fly with the Bossmans, and especially not Mrs. Bossman. I've learned the hard way to be very proactive in my duties, which is directly why I am now a great parts guy. Didn't take long to find out that it's just far easier and safer to be able to redirect the coming storm with knowledge and paper trails than it is to face the fury head on with laziness and ignorance. She always says the 3 most important rules to follow in this industry are 1. Cover your ass, 2. Cover your ass, and 3. Cover your ass. To which I've added a 4th rule, always send an email beginning with, "Per our phone call, I would just like to remind you," always have an email. Saved my ass so many times. Becomes relevant later. And she freaking loves me because I have become exceedingly excellent at making her job easier through diligent bookkeeping. As you also might imagine, doing all this ordering and invoicing and emailing and such demands heavy use of a computer. And for years I had to make do with one that was never built, nor intended for the task. It wasn't even very old, just an underpowered tablet-style budget computer, originally only meant for the shop foreman to occasionally check estimates. At any given time, I had to run our estimating software plus 2 to 4 price matching programs and their accompanying background scanning programs, plus multiple Chrome windows for email and parts vendor and parts finder websites, plus image software to view repair photos or edit diagrams to email back and forth. The budget computer had 2 gigs of RAM and a dual-core 1.3 GHz processor. It could barely handle running Notepad if you had the main estimating software running, and it made my job painfully slow, even at the best of times. For 4 years, I would mention it to Mrs. Bossman, and it was always, oh right, I keep meaning to look into that, and then nothing. But that was better than bringing it up with Mr. Bossman. Mr. Bossman was a former repair technician before they opened their own shop together, so anything on the office end is already good enough until it breaks and not worth wasting more money on in his eyes. All the upgrades should be on the production side of the shop, since that's what he knows well. She's much more practical about office upgrades, thankfully. Anytime I would mention how slow my computer was and how much it was slowing down my work, he would just laugh it off and say, "It does the job, don't it?" and walk away far too pleased with himself. Mrs. Bossman had been going back and forth with a specific vendor that was arguing against some outstanding credits and unpaid invoices that didn't match our numbers, which means they don't match my numbers. So she came into my office to ask me to look into them as normal, but today is not normal. It's especially busy and I am already a day behind where I should be. Cue malicious compliance. This time I decided that unlike normal, my workload was light enough, that I totally had the time right then and there and could look them up for her right on the spot instead of bringing her the files later that day. This seemed urgent after all, so I began searching our database for the problem invoices and very deliberately and thoroughly went through every program I possibly could, opening every estimate and reconciliation and digital footprints to pull up any scrap of even slightly relevant information for her, so that she had all the relevant info to argue with the vendor. Each new screen freezing and pausing and loading anew, each new refresh taking more of those long-form time-dilated seconds to complete, those seconds that drag on and on and on like waiting for a traffic light to turn. I was just being properly diligent, you must understand. Oh, here it is. I would say my most matter-of-fact, perfectly normal, everything is fine and standard and typical voice. Yeah, that part was returned back on, Oh, let me pull the credit memo. Oh, yeah, no, actually that just shows when I generated the return, but not when the vendor actually took it back. Actually, I remember this one now. The driver didn't leave a return confirmation slip, so I think I sent the vendor a reminder email about that. Let me pull that up. Ah, yes, I told him about the issue 2 months ago, and oh, this is a follow-up email that was part of another chain. Let me forward you both of those. And actually, I think I can still pull up the estimate here since it has the full reconciliation. Oh, I hope it didn't freeze completely. Just wait a second and it usually catches back up. She kept her smile up, but I could tell it had shifted and she was getting annoyed. Does it always take you this long to look up the invoices? I could tell she was getting really impatient, but she couldn't say anything about it since I was doing exactly what she just asked of me. And she does normally love that I'm this thorough, so long as she's not waiting in real time. Oh yeah, this is normally like this, I said casually. It's kinda frustrating sometimes, but Mr. Bossman doesn't want to buy another computer since this one does technically do everything I need it to do. Perfectly innocent moon eyes. It doesn't slow me down too much, not usually. Blink blink, puppy dog face. I continued doing this for all 5 or so problem invoices, and honestly, it was a 100% typical thing to look up and really only took maybe 50 minutes total in the end. The only difference was making a big show of it while intentionally making it look like I wasn't making a show of it, but that was enough. Well, I really think we need to look into getting you a new computer. This can't be good for production turnarounds if it's always being this slow. Huge success. Storm of Fury successfully redirected from self to vendor, armed with timestamped acknowledgement for every rogue charge, and finally knowing the crap I have to sit through each and every time I double click. With all the invoices and credits properly tracked on our end, vendors accounting had to admit the fed up had been on their end and we had been billed in error. I'm not always right, but even when I'm wrong, I can usually pull up a time-dated email to make it look like I wasn't wrong, bend a little, and the hurricane may just pass you by for a less prepared target. She waited a few weeks to find a good deal, but sure enough, I had a new computer shortly thereafter that is much more capable of running everything I needed to run without derping out on me, and it's been an absolute champion. Decided to write this because it has been almost exactly 2 years working on the new machine that is still going strong, and just today I got an unrequested raise for good performance, so I'm feeling overly pleased with myself. Boss makes major changes to schedule and gets me fired. This happened way back in the 90s when I had a night job as a computer operator on the mainframe. Big computer that Windows 3.1 is more powerful, or so it seemed. Our company relocated to a neighboring state over a weekend, and I was scheduled to work Saturday and Sundays night, 12 hours each, and have Friday off. Our company relocated to a neighboring state over a weekend, and I was scheduled to work Saturday and Sundays night, 12 hours each, and have off Friday. But was told to call Friday at 6 p.m. for directions to the new place. While I was there, I didn't know how to get there from where I lived. Since I wasn't scheduled, I ran the errands that I would do over the rest of the weekend because of the schedule, and at 6 I called. Conversation went like this. Hello, Boss Weasel, I'm calling to get directions to a new building. Boss Weasel, good, he gave me directions and said he will see me in an hour. Me, wait, I'm not scheduled and I hadn't been to sleep yet as I wasn't supposed to be there. Boss Weasel, plans changed, sorry I forgot to call. This meant I wasn't going to get any sleep for basically 2 days, and I told him that. He didn't care. I said I've got to crash for a couple and would be there when I could. I grabbed a 2-hour nap and drove out there. Needless to say, I crashed out at 3 a.m. and was caught the next day by Boss Weasel. I did get everything done I was supposed to get, but shit happens. Well, I got threatened with being fired but wasn't. But I was written up for it and everyone else that was involved told him he was wrong. He didn't care. So 5 or 6 months of bullshit happened and he decided to demote me to distribution clerk. This meant I had to separate thousands of pages of reports and get them to the right person. Of course I wasn't trained to do this and mistakes happened. So here's where the fun begins. He called me into his office, left the door open, and just yelled at me. He told me that I wasn't to separate or distribute the reports, just pull them off the printer and let someone that wasn't a fuck up do it. I realized something then and I smiled to myself and said for him to put that in writing. The idiot did. The letter with the company logo stated that under no circumstances was I to distribute the reports. I said okay and happily went on my way. He was going on vacation that night and I knew the crap storm that was going to happen since that night. A first day and the last day of the month was the night the paychecks were printed. Well, the difference with paychecks is that they were run through a special machine that separated them. There were about 500 or so, and then they would be placed in envelopes by the payroll department. They picked up first thing in the morning. So about 10 minutes before they were to arrive, I got my coffee and Danish and waited. Payroll clerk, where are the checks? Me, over there. I pointed to a 2-foot pile of papers. I need them separated. Me, well, can't do it. What the fuck? Why not? Well, Boss Weasel ordered me not to. I showed her a copy of the letters as I took the original home. Well, we'll see about that. Me, okay. Payroll clerk got Boss Weasel underling, who actually was a decent person. Underling, OP, what is going on? Me, boss, told me in no uncertain terms that under any conditions am I to separate or distribute any reports, so I'm not. Underling, he knew the reasons. I will authorize it. Me, I'm not letting you take the heat for it. Call him and get permission. Once that's done, it will take 5 to 10 minutes to do it. Underling, okay. He reaches for the phone, tries to call him, and no response. He went hunting and there were no phones. I said, sorry, won't do it. Finished my coffee, put my coat on, and went home. Told him I would see him Monday, as I don't work Friday. I handed him the copy of his letter and left. They did manage to separate the checks eventually and everyone got paid. I had direct deposit, so I didn't care. Nothing they could do to me as I followed my instructions to the letter, but I knew I was done there and I didn't care. Boss Weasel got reams for that and made it his goal to get me to quit. But I wanted unemployment, so that wasn't happening. I got fired a month later and was told my goodbyes were talked about for months. When I saw him by my now former workmates, I let him have it. Last thing I said to him was that his boss needed him under his desk now. Run along and bring tissues, you'll need them. About a month or so later, I want to say hello to the guys I worked with for 10 years, and who answers the phone? Boss Weasel. Except now he was demoted to what was my position and had to work third shift and weekends. He didn't last long. I found out later where he went to and realized that a dear friend of mine worked there too, got him fired. I ran into him on a street fair a year later, and the only reason I didn't rip him a new hole was that he has his young son with him. I am too nice. So those were the stories for today's video. Give me a like if you enjoyed this and subscribe to stay up to date.